Good morning, students. This is English class, class 12. Today we are going to take up poem number 1 from your book Flamingo. The poem's name is My Mother at 66. Students, the poem My Mother at 66 is a beautifully composed poem by Kamala. It deals with the complexities of human relationships. The poem brings home the point that aging is a natural process and is going to envelop one and all. In our young days, we are so busy in fulfilling our own desires that we forget to love and look after our elderly parents. The poet sees her mother by her side, in the car, dozing, and looking almost like a corpse, that is, a dead body. For once, she wishes to stay with her mother, to share her loneliness. But this is not possible for her, as she has other commitments. The poem also highlights the compulsion of life, where one has to forego one relation for another due to social and personal obligations. Students, now let's understand the poem. Driving from my parents' home to Cochin last Friday morning, I saw my mother beside me, doze, open mouthed, her face ashen like that of a corpse, and realized with pain that she was as old as she looked. Here, addressing the reader, the poet shares her experience about one Friday morning when she was on her way to the airport in Cochin, moving away from her parents' home. Her aged mother was sitting beside her in the car. She noticed that her mother was sleeping with her mouth open. Her face appeared colorless, as if it were of a dead body. A sudden fear and pain gripped the poet, and she realized that her mother was actually very old. This also indicated that she might pass away soon. This was a hard thing to accept, and its realization was alarming. Students, let's continue with the next lines of the poem. But soon put that thought away and looked out at young trees sprinting, the merry children spilling out of their homes. Here, the poet further says that soon she tried to shrug off this negative thought and looked out at nature, perhaps to seek solace. The trees along the road seemed to be hurrying past the speeding car. They were young in contrast to her old mother. The movement of trees and the speeding car were reminders of the fact that time had flown by. The poet also saw some joyous children who had rushed out of their homes as if something had spilled over from a crowded vessel. This view probably reminded her of her childhood and of the time when her mother was young. Students, let's continue with the next lines in the poem. But after the airport security check, standing a few yards away, I looked again at her, wan, pale as a late winter's moon. Here, the poet continues to narrate the event and discloses the scene after she had gone through the security check at the airport. She looked back at her mother, who stood some distance away and looked as dull and lifeless as the late winter's moon. This comparison with a negative object indicates that the scene evoked a sense of helplessness in the poet. So students, let's continue with the next lines and the last lines of the poem. And felt that old familiar ache my childhood's fear, but all I said was, "See you soon, Amma." All I did was smile and smile and smile. Here, the poet admits that she sensed a pain which she had experienced in her childhood as well, whenever the thought of losing her mother gripped her. But today, she hid her true feelings from her mother and bid her a farewell, assuring to see her soon. She continued to smile to cover up her apprehensions and pain, as it was the only thing that she could give to her mother at that moment. Students, the poem My Mother at 66 covers the following themes. Aging is a natural process and no one can escape it. Death is inevitable. Fear amongst children of losing their mothers or separation from their parents. Reflection on the subtle complexities of human relations. Students, now let's take up the summary of the poem. The poet's visit to her old mother has come to an end and she has to return now. So she is going to Cochin in a car to take a flight home. Her 66-year-old mother is accompanying her to the airport. On the way, the old woman, that is the mother of the poet, she dozes off. And the poet looks at her intensely and sorrowfully. The mother's pale and loosely open mouth looks as a lifeless body. It has a clear expression of pain and suffering. Unable to see her mother's pale face for long, the poet looks out of the car window and finds young trees sprinting past her and young children rushing out of their homes to play in the open. This sight makes her reflect upon old age, which is an inescapable part of human life. A deep fear about her mother's physical decay and imminent death upsets and grieves the poet. When she reaches the airport and the security check is done, she once again glances at her mother's pale and colorless face. Her face is looking like a winter's moon, pale like winter's moon. There is one common thing between mother's face and winter's moon, that both are pale. The narrator's childhood fears of being separated from her mother haunt her once again. Her doubt that she may not be there for long grips her mind, but still she cannot give up her journey plans. Even her words, "See you soon," seems ironical to her. For she is not sure after how long would she be able to see her, and also if her mother would live that long. However, she hides all her worries and anxieties behind a long and sweet, though hollow, smile and bids her mother a cheerful send off with a hopeless assurance of meeting her again soon. Students, now let us discuss about the literary devices used in the poem. Let's take up rhyme scheme first. As we can see that no regular rhyme scheme has been used in the poem, so we can say that the poem is composed in free verse. You can also notice that the whole poem is in single sentence punctuated by commas. It means there is no full stop anywhere in the poem. And the poem ends with an ellipsis. You can look at the last line of the poem. All I did was smile and smile and smile. And after that, there are 6 dots. This is the example of ellipsis. Generally, in ellipsis, there are 3 dots. Coming to the next literary device, that is simile. In simile, two different objects are compared with each other having one common quality or attribute. Here in this poem, let's see the examples. First one is, her face ashen like that of a corpse. Here, the mother's face is pale and greyish. She seems to have lost all vitality. Such paleness, that is, greyish color of the skin, is usually associated with a sick person or a dead body. Coming to the next example, that is, wan, pale as a late winter's moon. Here, two different objects, mother's face and winter's moon. Both are compared with each other. Why? Because they have one common quality, that is paleness. We can observe that in winters the moon is not that bright because of the fog and mist. So it appears yellowish. Same way, mother's face is also appearing pale and dull. Next poetic device is repetition. The example is smile and smile and smile. Poets often repeat single words or phrases, lines, and sometimes even the whole stanzas at an interval to draw readers' attention, sometimes to lend unity to the piece or to create musical effect and to emphasize a point. Here in this example, smile and smile and smile, the repetition of the word smile draws attention to the rather long, hollow and artificial smile the poet had to put on to cheer up her mother and to hide her own worry, anxiety and guilt. Students, the next is imagery and symbols. In this poem, the poet has used many images like trees sprinting, merry children, winter's moon. When we read about all these, our minds create pictures of the same. And all these are symbolic of one thing or the another thing. Let's take up first example, trees sprinting. Trees sprinting is symbolic of life and growth. Merry children are symbolic of youth, vitality, happiness and life. Winter's moon is symbolic of death. Coming to the next poetic device, contrast. In this poetic device, two different ideas are placed together in close proximity in a piece of writing or in a poem. Here in this poem, there is contrast between old age and youth. Example is, ashen corpse and corpse-like face is contrasted with the young trees sprinting outside and the merry children coming out of their homes. The next poetic device is personification. In personification, when the qualities of human beings are given to non-human beings or non-human objects, it is known as personification. For example, young trees sprinting. Sprinting or running is the attribute of either human beings or animals, but here the same attribute has been given to trees. Trees cannot run, they are stable, but the same quality has been implied to trees. That is why we can say that trees are personified.